Good evening. I think we'll get the show on the road. Thank you for joining us tonight. I just wanted to get the opportunity to talk you through some of the plans that we've been making to come back to school, but more importantly, give you the chance to ask some questions, because that's obviously going to help inform how we do this correctly. I do hope lots of you had a very good holiday. You've had some time just to refresh after your teaching load last term. Can I just say specifically to the families who've got relations in Lebanon, I hope everybody's safe, and please get in touch if there's anything we can do to support you at what must be a very worrying and difficult time. So just moving on, I'd like to introduce three colleagues. There are a number of us in the background, but three colleagues who are going to help you with this evening's webinar. Tim McConnell-Wood, who is our pastoral deputy head, pastoral deputy head, I just demoted him, our pastoral vice principal, Damien Ward, who is the academic vice principal, and Philippa Wraithmel, who is the digital head of our digital strategy. In the background, the operations vice principal and various other people just helping us with questions and things. So what are the purposes tonight? Firstly, I think the most important thing is reassurance. I'm not going to beat about the bush. This has been probably one of the most taxing 6-7 weeks that I've had in my teaching career. I think that what we thought was difficult at the start of remote learning, this is a different kind of fish. It sort of brings out the competitive tennis player in me. I love it. What we're trying to do is really focus on trying to bring your kids back to the school. I think it's important they do come back face to face, but we have to bring them back safely. And actually, the second thing we have to look at is the social aspect, because they will have had quite a lot of isolation. Their friendship groups have been broken down. So I will be focusing on that as a second. And then, ironically, third, the education. And the reason I say that order is if I have safe kids, if I have happy kids, then they'll learn. So that's the priority. The second thing is, I'm not going to promise that this is going to be perfect from the start. What I'm going to do is the same approach as last year. We did an approach which is very simply broken down to the concept of do, and then you review. And the review's been only possible because you've given us some fantastic feedback, and I'd like to encourage you to do that, to continue. And then after the review, you simply refresh, and we go again. We started pretty slowly in the remote learning period. I think some people were pretty critical of that. What I wanted to do originally is get the ownership onto the kids and to look at it as a long-term thing. I never thought it was going to be 2 weeks. I thought it would be much longer. So that's what we've tried to do. What we will be offering is a face-to-face offering. There will be a remote offering, and there will be a task-based, if you like, asynchronous offering. And the reason for that is that there will be families outside the country who can't hit the time zone, so we have to do the task-based teaching. There will be people who cannot come to school because they have elderly relations or people with immune disorders, whatever it might be. And there'll be people who just say, look, I just don't want my kids to go back at this stage. And then the face-to-face is the bit that we've got to get. So this is the new bit, and this is the bit that we're going to get right. The first thing we'll do is the first week of term, we will have all the school being taught, but we will only have a certain number of year groups in each day. And the reason for this is that what we've done is we've divided the school up into teaching zone, obviously bubbles, and we have also ways into the school and ways around the school. And unless I can rehearse at length with small groups of people where they go, what they can do, and ingrain in them the importance of that, that's the way we're going to keep the bubbles separate from each other, and we're going to keep them safe. So that's the most important thing to say, is that not everybody will come back on day one. We will bring people in at different times for the first week, and there will be flexibility for the first couple of weeks of term. So if you're not back because you've been abroad and you need to quarantine, please don't worry. Your child will isolate, as the government has said, for 14 days. And on that subject, lots of rumors about people saying that they're not going to isolate, they're just going to send their kids back in. That's great until somebody else's child is ill or somebody else's grandparent is ill because of your actions. So I'm saying that pretty clearly. We have a social responsibility here, and we need to stick to that. And the consequence is, if we get that wrong, is, well, I don't need to rehearse that. So I'm saying it as a first off. Now, ironically, the most complicated parts of the day are going to be the drop-off and the pick-up. Now, what we will do over the next week, we will circulate a map of the school, the external map of the school. What we're doing at the moment is collecting up enough people to rehearse. I talked rather glibly about road testing our thing. And I think if you look at what we did 2 years ago when there was mayhem in the car park, what we're trying to do is stagger the entry so people can arrive 360 around the campus. So we're lucky we have campus roads. The road goes right the way around the back of the school. We can drop 50 people around the back of the school at any one time. We're lucky all the doors of the sports centre go out onto the back. And we're looking at between 7 and 8 different entrance points. Now, obviously, for those of you with younger children, we're going to need to be able to bring, and we've approached ADIC, and ADIC are happy for a parent to come in with a younger child, so that we're setting up an ability for you to deliver those children to the outside of the classroom without actually sort of invading, if you like, the bubble. Pickup is going to be even more complicated because we're going to have times, colours, and you're going to have to turn up at your particular point, notice on the fence, colour code on the fence, and your child will be waiting. They will literally be thrown in through the window. No, they won't. We'll pop them into the car and we'll need you to move off and round the front of the school, etc. So that's the most complicated thing. I haven't gone into detail because the first thing we're going to do tomorrow, I didn't send it today because I didn't want people filling in a questionnaire before they'd heard what we said and they'd read, obviously, our Q&A. Just a subject to the Q&A, please read those Q&As. I'd like to say that we've got everything under control, but actually in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be very, very busy, as are the staff. And if all we're doing is answering the same question 10 times over, we're not going to make progress. So please read those Q&As so that you can pick up the latest on what's going. So pick up is obviously going to be complicated. Now, fundamentally, we've got to look at the school in a number of different ways. What we've done over the last couple of weeks, and a massive thank you particularly to Tim and Damien, who've been here with me all the holidays, we've literally mapped the school out in terms of we've laid out classrooms. We have nice little 1.5 metre bamboo sticks and 2 metre bamboo sticks, and we measure the different desk distances, etc. But effectively, the children in FS1, the children in FS2 in year 1, the government have dictated, and very, very wisely, that they should be in bubbles of 10. Now, a number of schools around town are saying, yeah, that's great, we'll have 2 bubbles of 10 in the same classroom. We don't think we can do that safely. So we're going to have a bubble of 10 for FS1 and FS2, and we're going to have to rotate, obviously, mornings and afternoons. Now, in the case of FS1, they're not going to come back, and they're not going to come straight in after a long holiday for a full morning. We'll build that up gradually. And those classes will probably start quite early in the morning. The reason they'll start early in the morning is I don't want sort of, that age of child who's absolutely exhausted going on too late into the afternoon when they would normally be sleeping. Same with FS2. Year 1, holding my powder dry a little bit. I think by using extra spaces like the dining room, the junior dining room, some of the computer rooms, we may be able to get year 1 in full time. But again, that'll depend on these surveys that I'm going to ask you to fill in. They'll come out tomorrow morning, a questionnaire, and they'll be asking you questions like, are you coming back? Are you not coming back? Are you unsure? Because the numbers will really dictate what we have, what policy. We've got about 3 different plans on the go at the moment, and which policy we take will depend on numbers. So, be honest with that. You'll have the flexibility initially to change, but once we settle a rhythm, we will be asking you, look, choose one form of learning, because we won't be able to keep changing the timetable ad infinitum. So that's the bubbles of 10. From year 2 onwards, year 2 will be a slightly more formal setting for the morning. And then what we're lucky is the dining room has 3 partitions, 140 odd meter space. I can spread out their playground or their playrooms so that they're safely distancing, and we're using all the spare sort of equipment there. So that's the plan there. For the rest of the school, again, 1.5 meters apart, we can fit between 18 and 20 children safely. They will always in class be 1.5 meters apart. The teachers will always be 2 meters apart from each other and 2 meters apart from the children. And any circulation space, there will literally be stepping stones, stickers. We've ordered, I think, 4,500, 5,000 stickers. They will literally hop from sticker to sticker, 2 meters apart. Why? Because I need to keep the routes sterile so that we know where they're going. You'll find that as you come in the morning, all the doors will be blocked open, simply so they don't have to touch the handles. We'll have specific cleaners who go around and obviously remove those. So there's a lot of thought gone into that. The key thing here is all going to be about mindset. What we have to do, all of us, is we have to look at this. I keep using the analogy that this is a bit like malaria. I go out to Africa, I go on safari, I know there's malaria, but I make sure I sleep under a net, I take my anti-malarials, I slap on. We've got to get ourselves into a mindset that we're minimizing risk. And most importantly, the most important thing is people have to get into a mindset of who have I been in contact with? Because the model that has worked the best in the world is the New Zealand model, and it's because they've tracked and traced very well. Now, there's a very good track and tracing mechanism out here. There's also then the honesty of saying, right, who did I see last night when we went out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because then we can control any infection. We get a couple of infections in the school, we can probably isolate different units. If we get lots of them, the school will close and we will be back to remote learning very, very quickly. So there's a lot to think about that. Complications, lunch times, they will eat lunch in their rooms. They will have we will have bottles to, rather like the restaurants, to sterilize the tables. Separate water bottle in each classroom. Teacher will sterilize the stuff, etc., etc. So we thought about that sort of detail as well. Cleaning regimes, we're talking at the moment. I'm seeing various different air conditioning companies, whether we go ozone, whether we go ultraviolet light, whether we go HEPA filters. That's the sort of thing that's going on in the background at the moment. So really what I'm trying to say to you is there's been a lot of thought into it, but I'm not trying to convince you that everybody's got the answers. What we're trying to do is we're trying to go through everything with as many eyes as possible. And part of the reason we wanted this evening is to introduce some of this sort of detail, get you to read the questionnaires, and then to start to second guess us. I want you to second guess us. I want you to ask the questions, but don't write to me an email and expect to reply. What I'll do is I'll collect those back up together. We'll discuss them in our meetings. We'll put a collective response out, and it will inform our thinking. So I could carry on ad infinitum. I have bored my staff rigid. Just to reassure you, all bar, 20% of the staff travelled over the holidays. We have at the moment 6 out of the country. They will be in the next 24 hours. So they will be able to be on site by the time we wanted them here, so that we can have a good, clean week in the school with everyone. Now, as everyone comes back and takes up the reins, I get more eyes, more ears, more sort of dissent against a particular thing, and we will get more and more accurate. You will notice I haven't put up a timetable yet. I haven't put up this form will start at this particular time. What we will do by the next webinar, which will be next Wednesday, that's the sort of detail we'll go into. But I wanted to have this sort of, open it out to things. A few thank yous, group of parents who've been brilliant from the medical profession who've helped advise us. We're working with independent medical companies. And as you see, as you've seen, we are actually we mobilized our staff about 10 days ago in terms of the domestic staff. We're talking to them about isolating them on camps. We're looking at their regimes. We're looking at the risk assessments from the companies, because we've had time to do that. Now, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to hand over to Tim McConnell-Wood, because he's going to direct the questions. So what I'd like you to do is, if you've got any particular questions, there is a feed on the right-hand side of your screen where you can type in a question. We will answer as many of those as we can tonight. Those of you who don't get your question answers, what I'd like to do is write your question, and if you could just put your name, your full name, and what year groups your children are. If we don't get to your question, then we can pick that up over the next couple of days and answer those individually. Some questions will be specific to families. By doing that, we can then specifically just answer that to that particular person. So I've talked too much, probably talked about 5 minutes more than I was supposed to. Tim was told to scratch his head. That's probably why he's got no hair left now. So when I was speaking too much, so I'm handing over to Tim now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. So please do ask any questions. Actually, what is happening, we've got a couple of staff in your meeting room. So they're looking at your feed. We can't see your feed. And then they are passing those questions on to us. We've had one question just asking about whether the children are going to be allowed to go outside at break time. I'll answer that, I think, rather than Mike. The short answer to that is yes. Again, we'll put in place whatever is safe. Now, clearly, back end of August, early September, it's very, very hot, and we need to take into consideration their safety there. But yes, the full intention is that at various break times during the day, our current program plan is that we would have a phased break time throughout the school, so that there will be an opportunity for the children to get outside. And we don't want to go into any details, but also providing lavatory breaks for them and things like that. So absolutely, yes, the idea is we will enable them to get outside. A good question has also come in, not on the same theme, but along the same lines, about concerning about the mask they're going to have to wear all the time. Again, I'll answer that. The regulations we've had from the government are very clear that any child over the age of 6 or 6 and over must wear a mask, and we will have to enforce that. That is the current regulation. I know it's going to be difficult. I think our feeling, particularly with the younger ones, is again that the staff will be sensitive to that. If they're sitting more than 2 meters away from people, they can probably take their mask off for a very short period of time just to relieve the tension and the pressure and so on. So we would be sensitive to that, but again, clearly that is the regulation, and we'll be monitoring those very carefully. What type of face masks do you recommend? And in the case of cloth masks, how often do you mandate that they are being washed? That's also a good question. If Mike, if you don't mind, I'll take that one as well. We've been working with Globe, our uniform suppliers, and they have they're producing for us a school recommended mask, but it's not school compulsory. Children can wear whichever masks that they feel most comfortable with. We would say, the school mask is a good cloth one. Mike's been wearing trialing a version of it, and he's been very happy with it. It's comfortable and it works very well. However, if the children have sort of got their own masks that they've found over the holidays and they're happy with those, they're more than welcome to wear that. So we don't see that as being part of uniform. How do we mandate they're being washed? That's a really good question, and it links to the issue of uniform. We have said in the Q&A that we'd like the children to wear uniform. It's a bit like the hospital scrubs idea that hospital care workers have to wear scrubs and they take them off at the end of each shift. What we would like for parents to do is to wash uniform on a daily basis to prevent the virus getting in through clothing, and it's difficult for us to mandate, and it's one of those where we have to rely on the honesty and responsibility of parents, and it is a very strong message we would get out before the term started.
Can I just come in on that, Tim? So firstly, what we will be doing is preparing a welcome pack. That welcome pack will have a mask. Just been talking this evening about actually having the name tag on the outside so that people don't pick up the wrong mask. So they'll get one of those from us as a sort of welcome back present. Wow, Father, whatever. Yeah. So in the pack will also be obviously hand gel, but also things like maps of circulations around the school and a map for you at home, and then just a reminder of how we do things. So with the mask, I think simply because if you're wearing them for the day, all of us have worn them for the day. They smell pretty manky by the end of the day. So I think you should be having a couple of them, and it's sort of new mask each day. Each child will every morning come out of their car, and we're mandating that they, have their bags in the back by them. They literally get out the car. They go onto a stepping stone, one of the stickers. They walk out. They'll all walk through one of the disinfectant mats. They will clean their hands. They will go through a thermal camera. They'll do that at the beginning of the day. They'll do that at the end of the day. There are digital thermometers in each classroom, and obviously outside each classroom there's hand gel. And the classrooms, as I say, will be cleaned on a daily basis. Tim talked about loo stops. The most difficult bit of the timetable is timetabling the older children to be able to go to the loo, because we have to clean the loos after each bubble goes in. So it's sort of, quite interesting trying to land all the planes.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to head towards the academic side, and if I can bring Damien in to answer a couple of questions, focusing particularly on Year 10s, come from a Year 10 parent, but it applies to broadly across the senior school, really. How will bubbles work for students in the senior school when they go from class to class on the basis of their subject choices? This is obviously specific to Year 10. And there's a bit more information, please, about how Year 10 classes or senior school classes will work.
It's a good question, and I'll try and give as quick an answer as possible, and hopefully I'm succinct enough. With Year 10 and 11, there are a number of mandatory subjects that the students have to do: maths, English, science, Arabic, and tutor time, as well as either Islamic, moral education, etc. So that's the starting point. Students will put into bubbles and assign classes, and teachers will rotate through the day visiting those classes. Then we come to the problem of the options. Students have 3 subjects which they can elect to study. We currently have 19 subjects on offer, so the permutations are difficult, is the key word. But within any one bubble, we're looking at limiting the optional choices down to 4 or 5 different combinations, which then creates 4 or 5 sub-bubbles. What we're looking to do for 10 and 11 is we're setting aside 11 classrooms for Year 10, and we're setting aside 9 classrooms for Year 11. So each class will be in a bubble. There will be 5 core bubbles, and then we'll be able to allow breakouts from that where they can go and have their subject specialist lessons without having to mix with students from other bubbles. I think there's a little bit of criticism coming in on the chat for bubbles, but it is one of the things that is mandatory from ADIC. It's one of the restrictions we have to work within, and it certainly makes timetabling very challenging. One of the benefits we've had is we do have a fair few classrooms, and we are able to put between 18 to 20 students in a classroom. So if we assign fixed classrooms that are not used by anyone else throughout the day, we can break our students in Year 10 and 11 out into smaller groups, so that they can be taught by their subject specialists without mixing with other groups. The trade-off for that is that they won't get as much face-to-face time in any given week. So in a normal week, you would have a full timetable full of face-to-face lessons. Currently, we're working anywhere between 15 to 19 hours of face-to-face in school, and the rest will be made up of online assignments and online face-to-face lessons as well. I can't commit yet to exactly how many hours 10 and 11 will get, as we're still working through the timetabling of that. But we are committed to be giving at least 2, and in some subjects 3, some of those core subjects, maths, English, Arabic, 3 hours of face-to-face. The option subjects probably 2 hours of face-to-face, with supplemented with online learning, both face-to-face and preloaded tasks. I've tried to give a quick an answer as I can there, Tim. Have I covered the key points?
Yes.
Can I suggest the only thing I would add, Damien, is obviously when you have a subject like computer science, the potential for a computer science teacher who teaches 1 or 2 lessons a week means they have to travel around so many different classrooms. They in themselves become a problem of being a vector. So what we're looking at is that computer science lesson will probably be somebody remotely dialing into the particular lesson with a class teacher in there. simply to minimise the number of teachers that are going around lots of different classroom groups. So that would be the only thing I would add.
Thanks, and it sort of almost links to another question that's come up about, we've mentioned webcams and delivering lessons to those children who opt for remote learning. Will these be live lessons? Yes, they will. The idea is you can access a live lesson alongside peers who are having the lesson in front of the teacher physically. So yes, the sort of idea of the webcam for certain year groups, and particularly the older year groups, the idea is that then the student can engage in a lesson as though it's a live lesson and they're just a member of the class. Equally, those lessons or tasks associated with those lessons would be laid out for those students who aren't able to be there live. And that then sort of leads on to a sort of subsequent question, Damien, if I ask you. E-learning was mentioned. Is it going to be, I think the question is, how is it going to be different? And how will the curriculum be delivered to maintain parity between someone who is in school and someone who is not in school?
Yeah, two very good questions, but very discrete and separate answers, I think. The first one depends entirely on the options and how many people respond to the survey. If we get 90% uptake on the survey with a strong indication of who's coming back in and who would prefer to remain at home, in all honesty, that will heavily steer the resources we dedicate to remote learning. We've learned a lot. We had a long review process after remote learning. We've picked out the key successes in each of the schools, and different things worked well. But one of the fundamental parts of that, certainly lower down the school, was the time available from parents and the input parents were able to offer. So we've tried to get a sense and a gauge of that in the survey as well. So in the survey, we're asking to what degree of support students will have at home. And again, that will really drive the resource that we put. The second question, in terms of mitigating what is learned, I mean, it's a very, very good question, and it's one that, again, I don't have a very straightforward answer to. All I can say is I'll echo what Mike said in terms of this process will evolve. We will be evolving what we do. One of the things we're working on is implementing and trying to keep and offer as much of the curriculum as possible, hence trying to move some teachers around and have some teachers connect to classes remotely. But one of the things we're working on behind the scenes, if we're not happy with that, is a more combined approach. So merging subjects together, merging content together, and indeed allowing students to engage and explore content in a thematic or a topic-based approach. That lends itself better to remote learning than perhaps having 5 or 6 different teachers lined up in one day. So again, it's about picking out the successes from last time, working out what suits parents and how many parents we will have in school, how many students we'll have in school, how many we'll have at home, the level of support parents can offer, and then how we begin to evolve and respond to what's happening on the ground, so to speak. And just a further point on that, if this was any normal given year, that's exactly what we would be doing. We would start off by looking at year 5 in particular. We'd start off by looking at how well they respond to having 11 different teachers in any one given week. And then we gauge where we put that project. And we've put the project at various different points in the year in previous years to allow for breathers, to allow students to engage with more content, to allow teachers to have a little bit more time with certain groups of students. So it's not a strategy we're just putting in for remote learning. It's something we've used in the past and will continue to do so when school goes back to normal, I suppose.
Tim, can I just interject, and I think Philippa may come in on this. Just really for information, one of the things, obviously massive thank you to my board, but what we've done over the summer, we have completely and utterly rebuilt our whole IT infrastructure. I won't quote the figures, but I've been trying to get people to spend 1/10 of that money in other schools around the world. Effectively, what we've done is we've reinforced our infrastructure so that it can actually deliver remote learning from school. We've speeded up, obviously, our internet and etc. We have also made it safer, so we've got the latest on that. But most importantly, we have bought another 650 new devices so that we are able to load the apps that you have been struggling to link in with 10 different links. We're able to load the apps on those machines and have a single login, so that when if we do end up going back with more remote, we're in a much better position to give you a machine that has been set up. It's set up with all the online safety, so that if they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, it's picking it up, etc. So there's been, over the summer, there's been a massive, massive investment in infrastructure. Our Wi-Fi has been completely redone, etc., etc. So maybe, Tim, if you want to direct the IT questions towards Philippa, and I'll stop talking.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Just so focusing now on the BYOD program that we have. We mentioned year 7. I apologise for looking to my right the whole time. I've got a big screen here and I can read it. I can't read it on my small screen. You mentioned year 7 require iPads. Is it safe to assume that this is for year 7 and above? Our daughter is going into year 9. And there's also a question about from a year 8 student just asking, is it absolutely necessary to buy an iPad Pro?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So it's a really important question. And I think what we have done so far, in any normal year, we would have had at end of the year, we would have invited parents in and discussed the BYOD with you. And we would have talked to you about the reasoning behind why we have decided to begin to request to have iPads and iPads Pro in school. And there are a lot of reasons. And actually, remote learning and what's happened during COVID has meant that we are not even allowed to distribute paper. And so there's a lot of reasons why actually now having a tablet version of a device is going to be much better for a hybrid learning experience. So to answer the questions in terms of BYOD, just to clarify, we are not asking everybody to buy an iPad Pro. That is an option. However, an iPad with the versatility of having its keyboard and a pencil will allow them to mix in with the curriculum as much as they need to. And that really is what we're looking at. So Damien has spoken about the fact that we may start to begin to blend some of the learning, but also in your traditional subjects, being able to have the versatility of writing on your iPad, writing an essay, doing equations, looking at maths, drawing onto it, and having it as a fully functioning workbook is going to become ever more important in our classrooms and at home, no matter where they're doing their learning from. We haven't requested anyone above year 7 purely to change their device, because if you have a device that works for your child at the moment, then that is an Apple device, then it will be suitable. The reason that we've done that is because we are now consistent across the whole school with our learning platform, which allows teachers to be able to distribute different documents, learning tasks, booklets, work that they want to distribute to their class, knowing that every single child will be able to access them in the same way. So as you can imagine, there were frustrations during remote learning when everybody is working from a different device. Well, now we have that consistency that we know that if we send a document out, that child can open it and access it, and that barrier to their learning is totally taken down. So BYOD was requested as an iPad, or recommended as an iPad or an iPad Pro for year 7, because they're the first year where we ask you to purchase that device. From year 8 upwards, and this includes obviously the question to year 9, if you are going to replace your device, or if you have the ability to be able to perhaps have an iPad as well, then we would recommend that an iPad is much more flexible for learning. If we think about the way that we're going back into the classroom, we're distancing, we need to be able to think about the fact that students need to be able to write. We don't want to give up that ability. For them to be able to write will help them to understand. It helps you to embed the knowledge more. We don't always want our students to be typing things on the laptop. Whereas if your child does have a laptop and they're having to write something, we then have the difficulty of being able to mark that work. Whereas if we have the iPad with a keyboard and a pencil, we actually have that versatility to share work, get marking work done, feed it back to that child, and then there's that progress that can be made from that. Whereas a laptop, although it has been a very versatile tool in the past, it's not necessarily as versatile in an educational setting, and that's where we're trying to get to. And as Mike has already said, we have now gone from year 2 all the way through to year 6, where we've been able to implement one-to-one, and all of those students will be getting an iPad with a keyboard, and we'll be requesting that parents bring in headphones and a pencil to be able to utilise that device with. So I hope that answers that question in terms of the BYOD.
Thank you, Phil. Yes, it does. Can I just also ask, are students going to need any other school supplies beyond iPad
Yeah,
pens?
so there are 2 iPad pens that we've recommended, which are in the FAQs, but we would also ask that you bring in headphones. Now, those headphones, again, just need to be basic headphones with a jack that can go into the side of the iPad or the device that your child's bringing if they're in year 7 and above, or they can be a Bluetooth device. So that's totally up to you, but we would request that. As we've mentioned already, there may be times when students are perhaps watching a video, they may be doing some independent work within the class, and we need to be able to have that functionality of having headphones as well.
Thank you. Sort of on the back of that discussion about devices, questions have been asked about, please confirm that we're still going to use pen and paper and pencil and painting and so on for younger children. Perhaps I could maybe direct that towards Damien.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think there's again, in the short term, we'll be guided by what the policies say and what we're allowed to do in distributing resources and the restrictions around that. But certainly once we go back to the normal, the iPad is there as a tool to assist learning. It will not replace experiences such as painting and using paper and pens and things like that. There will still be that as well, but the iPad is there to complement. And I think when you look at the key bits that Philip was talking about in terms of the marking, the feedback, the transition between the flow of the work generated there. I mean, the iPad is an incredibly powerful tool. I've been trialing it for the last year, and it's cut down immensely the amount of paper I distribute, but also improving those virtual interactions and making it quicker. I mean, I can ping back a piece of work to a kid at any time without having to wait to see them again. So in short, once we get past and get through this period, yes, there will be painting, there will be drawing, there will be art, DT, crafts. Of course, they will all be back on the curriculum, definitely.
And just the last question on the BYOD for the moment, can we just clarify which range of grades will be, or year groups will be using the iPad?
Absolutely. So we're going to have iPads throughout the school. We are in our bubbles in year 1, because the bubbles are of 10, they will actually be one-to-one. So they'll have a device available to them if that is necessary for their class time. From year 2 and upwards, they are one-to-one, and the devices are provided up until year 6. And then from year 7, as it always has been, we would request that they bring their own device, which is the outline of the document that we sent out prior to the summer. And
can they take them home?
So this is an interesting question. We, if you are not able to come into school, as Mike also mentioned earlier, we are setting up all these devices so that they are fully logged in. We're going to be using something called ClassLink, where you have an app that lets you into all of them. We're going to pre-log all of our students into those. And if there is a reason why a student is unable to get into school, perhaps they are an at-risk child, they're not able to because of a health reason or anything else, then there are reasons why we would be able to get those out to those students. However, what we would hope is that students would be back in school within their classes and they'd be able to use the devices. We wouldn't want them, if they are coming into school, to be taking them home, and that is purely for purposes of making sure that they're sterilised. So they would stay in the classrooms in the evening, but I would always say, and as a parent myself, if a child has had quite a lot of interactions online, doing digital work, working in the classrooms, it's going to be a different type of hybrid intensity within those classrooms when we go back. And I think it would, I personally would think it would be better to have a little bit of screen downtime once they're home.
Okay, thanks. And just got one final one. Are you recommending an iPad for year 10 as well, along with a laptop, or in lieu of a laptop?
So there is a lot of the sixth form and senior staff have actually requested that students do bring in an iPad or an iPad Pro. The only subject area that we have suggested that it would be inappropriate for would be computer science, purely to do with the hardware and the software that we need to have on there to allow you to be able to access the full curriculum. However, all of the rest of the subjects would be more than able to be accessed fully with an iPad. And thinking about things like the art and the D&T, actually, as Damien mentioned, the iPad is an incredible device to be able to do things like that on, a much more powerful device than a lot of the other tablets that are available out there. So we're definitely in a really great position to be able to be offering all of our subjects via the iPad device.
Thank you. What I'm going to do now is return to some of the operational type questions that have been asked. A number of our new parents and new students have been asking, is there an orientation day for new students? Yes, we had that on our original programme, Saturday the 29th of August. To a degree, we will be doing orientation remotely. So tutors will be having a one-to-one conversation with the new students and talking to parents on a one-to-one basis on that day. Because we're going to be staggering the year groups coming in, we will introduce the new students to the site on their first day in school. So the induction, if you like, for new students will be done initially remotely and then on their first day coming into school. But also parents are asking, can they come in and do a tour? Unfortunately not. The regulation is very clear unless there is a critical reason why parents need to be on site, for example, to bring a very young child into school. We are supposed to hold parental meetings either off-site or elsewhere, and we can't have parents walking around the site just yet. Our marketing department have been producing some videos that give you really good sort of visual tours of the school. We're very sorry that it's just not possible at this stage. We will, of course, once the regulations change, be very glad to have any new parents to come and have a look around the school on that question. Lots of questions, I'm being told, on COVID testing and teachers wearing a mask and people not being able to hear. I think those are two sort of separate questions. The COVID testing issue, ultimately, we are still awaiting final confirmation from the authorities about which tests, how regularly, and how they are to be conducted. We are working very closely with a medical organisation who are advising us, and we're looking to potentially use them to run our testing for us. I'm sure there'll be questions about who's going to pay for all of this. And again, we're waiting for confirmation from the authorities on that. All the authorities have said to this point is before starting, all students and all staff will be COVID tested, but they haven't said how, where, when, who pays, or anything like that. So we're waiting for more information from the government. As soon as we have that, and we do expect to hear something in more detail from them, you know. Teachers wearing masks and pupils not being able to hear, we totally understand that as an issue. And I think it's, for an old guy like me, it's going to be difficult for me to hear what the children are saying with their masks on as well. It's one of those, I think, goes back to what Mike said right at the start of the webinar, that we will see how it goes. And if it isn't working, we will review. We will take advice. We will, if there are situations like that, for example, we would be taking it further up the chain to say, look, this just doesn't work. What's the solution? At the moment, we over the summer period, we considered face masks, but not face masks, shields, but they don't come under the regulations as yet. And I can see Mike's itching to say something, so I'll stop talking.
Just to say that we have various schools who got together and we've made representations about face masks. I've got several transparent ones on order to try out. There are various ones with HEPA filters and things, but then there's contradictory advice about having a HEPA filter too close to you. So we're sort of looking at alternatives. Those of you who go on social media will see various things being advertised with clear face masks. We're sort of experimenting with them as we speak. It is a real issue, particularly with younger children, because so much of their learning happens by them watching somebody's lips and how their face moves. So much of human relationships rely on facial expression, and we're denying people with that. And so we've made a representation to, it's this whole risk thing. How much of it is a risk? And my feeling is what will happen is that we will start with a lot of regulations that are very, very tight. I actually don't have a problem with that. But I think as the schools come back, a rhythm is established. I think gradually, as we've seen around the town, there are ways around things. People, the authorities look at something and say, hey, yes, we can do that. And, you'll see, for example, that physical education at the moment is being saying a no-no, but the Sports Council is starting to relax the rules on some of the sports like golf and tennis and, that sort of things. We may even be able to run swimming clubs where people come in having left school, they come in, they swim, they go, they have a towel, towel suit on. The key problem with swimming is changing. So there's a lot of discussion. I mean, what I would say, ADIC, I think, have been absolutely brilliant throughout this cycle. We're very lucky that they've just employed new people. One of those people I know have known for 20, 30 years. So we're getting a very good interaction, and I think the leadership in ADIC really has been quite outstanding over this time. So we're lucky because if you look at what's going on in the news in the UK, and we'll talk about this tomorrow onwards because A-level results and GCSE results come up. If you look at the chaos around the world in some of these settings, we're extremely lucky with the leadership we've been given.
Thank you, Mike. Just further questions on sort of operational issues. What are the isolation protocols in the event there is a case discovered? Is it a case of the school being closed again with the discovery of 1 or 2 cases, or is the threshold higher than this? To a degree, we've answered that question in that I know there's a degree of criticism about the bubbles, but the fact is that if we are able to successfully bubble groups of children, then only the bubble would need to be isolated and quarantined, and therefore that's what we're trying to establish. It's to minimize the spread. I don't really want to get into the protocol yet because we have some, but we are having those looked at by our medical support teams and confirming that they are correct and safe and work. And so therefore, I suppose the key is to reassure you that we are working on isolation protocols, but we don't have details yet as to exactly how they will work, and we'll give you that information in due course. Somebody's also asked about...
Just in on that. I think the important thing there is that we've written our protocols. We want medical professionals to check them before we release them. But fundamentally, the concerns that I've had through emails, what happens if my child gets COVID? Will we be notified? Of course we will. The child, it's your children. You will be notified. You will be allowed to come. We've ordered the PPE so that, yes, you'll be suited up. Yes, the child will be isolated and suited up. Why Tim's being coy on it is these are things that there are professionals who know more than schoolmasters. We can have the thoughts, we can throw the ideas, but we need to check them against professionals, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Question also about the medical team, including psychologists, since the mental well-being and social aspects are top priority. Absolutely right. The short answer to the question is no, we don't have a psychologist working full-time with us, but we do have a psychologist who works with the school, and we have a full-time counsellor who actually during the remote learning period through March through to end of June was very active in dealing with individuals who we were concerned about. And as a school, we I suppose surrounding everything that we do is and what we like to pride ourselves on is our pastoral experience and expertise and the relationships that our teachers and tutors and class teachers have with each individual child. And there's a very strong link between what goes on in the classroom and the degree of pastoral support that they're given. And a number of children who were given quite a significant amount of support during the period of remote learning. And again, that will continue as we go on through the next phase of however this pans out. There's a question about if we choose to send our children back to school and down the line the new normal doesn't work for that child, is there scope for that child to then opt for distance learning? Is this for the entire year? Damien, could I guide that to you, please?
I think rather than giving any false hope and fake promises, I would defer to my previous answer. It really depends on how many people fill out the survey, how many people indicate they're coming back, and how many people indicate they are staying at home. And then by extension of that, how many people want to change in 2, 3, 4 weeks' time. It's very difficult to give an answer right now as to what that will look like. Because again, based on the survey, it'll depend on the resources we put into that. What I will say and what I will commit to is that we are committed to being flexible, we're committed to evolving our process, and we're committed to listening to the parents' feedback. And I hope, if nothing else, we evolved and we listened to feedback in term 3. So I think I'm confident in saying we will do that. The specifics, I can't comment on, but we'll certainly listen.
Can I just come in to? I think this is a realism, and I'm sorry if it sounds alarmist, but we're going to go through a cycle where the flu season will occur, and there's going to be spikes in this virus until they get the vaccines sorted out. So I think as a community, we have to have our heads around the fact that we've got to keep our remote learning and our face-to-face teaching in a fluid situation, because we could well be suddenly, as they have had in Hong Kong and China and various other places, schools have been opened and then there's been a spike and they've closed them again and then they've reopened them. So I think we need to be very clear on that, is that we've got to keep this fluidity. Now, the reason that that we've got to be careful with the flexibility thing, what we can't have is on a Sunday morning, people having had a pretty heavy weekend, and so Sunday morning they decide remote learning. We're not going to be able to allow that. We haven't got the flexibility of on a day-to-day changing. But we have to look at individual family circumstances and react to that. And we will have the flexibility to do that. But what I'm not going to do is, 7 o'clock in the morning, there's 250 emails saying, look, I'm sorry, little Johnny's not coming in today because we had a heavy weekend. We can't run that sort of flexibility, but we can run the flexibility where your circumstances change or something's not working. But that's not very different from how we would run a normal situation. It's discussions with tutors, and there's the flexibility that goes with it. It's a managed flexibility.
I mean, just to give a small indication of what would go into that. I mean, we're asking most of our teachers to face-to-face and support students who are at home. Quite often, that will mean that our teachers are working through the weekends, late into the evenings, preparing to support those students who are at home. And many of the materials to support students at home will be loaded in advance, sometimes up to a week in advance. I've just been keeping an eye on the questions coming through, so I'm just going to answer 1 or 2 questions, Tim, if that's okay, associated with that. So one of the key things are people are asking, about task-based remote learning. Yes, if you're not in the country, there will be task-based remote learning on offer. And one of the key things we learned from our previous offering of task-based remote learning is that it goes hand in hand when there's a connection. So what we will aim to do is we will support that. In the first instance, it may be very simply one connection per week with the teacher, but just a debrief in terms of how the tasks went, a little bit of feedback, a little bit of marking, and a little bit of that face-to-face input. So even though you may be out of the country and you may be on a task-based remote learning offering, we will still try to create connections, and we'll still try and support with a little bit of face-to-face. And that was certainly one of the things that came through in the feedback towards the end of last term.
Thank you, Damien. Just one more question. We're nearly at an hour, so I think we'll answer questions in 6 minutes or so, and then I'd like to wrap it up. I think the important thing for those parents who are here and maybe still have burning questions, we're taking note of all the questions that have been asked, and we'll add those to our question and answer sheet of information. And we will, of course, be holding another webinar next week where, again, questions can be asked. There are just a couple I'd like to pick up. One, somebody's asked, I don't know if it's still there. Yes. Can we get details for timings and durations of classes? I think at this stage, 54 minutes in, to try and go through 13 year groups with different class timings and so on is too much detail at this stage. And to be quite frank, we haven't quite got that exactly sorted out. What we are committing to is that the students, as much as possible, will do a full day of lessons, and actually how that will all work. Again, I'm sure through the discussions we've had tonight, it's a hugely complex situation, and the fact is that none of us have ever done this before, and so we're having to really learn as we go on. And it's unique in, I suppose, since education was first designed. So we will be looking very carefully at the nature of the timings of lessons, the duration of lessons, and how they're conducted. And once we have more worthwhile information, we will get that out to you. One thing
just to interject, the point there is that the survey, the questionnaire that we asked to be filled in from tomorrow onwards, that fuels the timetable. So I'm looking by next week to be able to go into detail with timings of drop-off and also what the timetable, the outline timetable will look like, so that parents can make decisions about returning to work in good time, so that they know what they do that. The difficulty is if 80% come back and 20% don't, or 50% come back and 50% don't, the flex of what we can do is completely different.
Thank you. Just one last question. It's a specific educational question. What subjects are not being offered? For example, PE, art, music, drama, and how will students conduct or undertake practical work? Damien, if I can just direct that to you again, please.
And all subjects will be offered, I think, is the short answer. I mean, but that might be seen as fobbing someone off. The subjects are split up into many different areas, and fundamentally it's about the delivering of skills and trying to deliver a skill in a different way. What we'll be looking at doing in terms of PE, music, drama, etc., is to offer those skills, most likely in an online session, whether the teacher dials in or the students are at home. But in terms of the practical-based subjects, PE, science, art, DT, we're working through the requirements for that. We have very specific requirements, which only allows up to 9 students at a time in those environments, with very controlled measures, and measures then about how we sterilize and wash that down. And indeed, that's one of the sticking points in terms of creating the new timetable. We're very hopeful that we'll be able to offer at least a practical experience for every 1 in 3 or maybe 1 in 4 of those lessons. So for example, if you've got DT and you're a DT GCSE student, you'll probably have 3 lessons of DT in a week. We are hopeful that we can at least make 1 in 4 of those lessons a practical lesson, so you're in the workshop, etc. That's what we're starting off with. As we get more fluid with those guidelines and the implementation of those, we may be able to have more, but we're certainly working hard to create those practical experiences for students in a safe way.
Can I just reinforce that with Damien, that there is the regulation. For those of you who've seen our science labs are probably twice the size as most science labs, because they're divided into a teaching area and a practical area. So the challenge we put back into the Education Authority is, look, this isn't a one size fits all. So, we're having screens made so that people can work opposite each other in a design technology room or in an art room. So there'll be perspex screens between the children. So not only are they 1.5 meters apart, but because they're facing each other, there will be a screen. And obviously things like one-to-one lessons with a teacher, with a learning support lesson. Again, the use of screens with a slightly bigger table. You won't be the shorter side, you'll be the length side of the table. Those are the sort of details that we're looking at, but we've ordered 120, 70 by 70 screens, and I think we've got another 30, 1 meter 20 by 1 meter 20 screens, as you probably see. I think, Tim is disappearing before my eyes because he's doing so much mileage. I think my Fitbit told me it was 52,000 in the last 2 days. That's the sort of thing we're trying to nail down now.
Thanks very much, Mike. Can I just thank everybody for posing those questions to us. I hope that you feel we've answered with enough clarity. I'd just like to reiterate that any unanswered questions we will aim to try and fill in terms of our question and answer information that we put out to you, and would also say that we're here this time next week to perhaps put a little bit more detail into what we've been talking about, and then answer any more questions. I will step back now, and I ask Mike if he wants to say a few words to finish off. Thanks very much, everybody.
Just to thank you really for your time this evening. I'm just going to add a couple of things. Firstly, to talk about the survey. It'll come out tomorrow. It'll come out probably mid-morning. We'd like that back by Sunday, if possible, Sunday early. It gives us time so that by next Wednesday, we've got some really quite detailed answers for you. The other thing that we're going to be needing to get from all of you is an indication of where you've been. We need to know who's been out of the country. We need to know health histories and things. Now, obviously, that's very sensitive information, but it's really, really important that in our planning, we know where the areas of risk at home are. So again, that questionnaire will be done by a professional organisation. That will come out slightly closer to the, or after this next run of things. So those are the things coming up. Please carry on emailing my PA. As I say, we will try and put things into Q&A. And if there's anything very specific to that family, obviously we will respond. But thank you for your time tonight. Sorry we've gone on a little bit too long, but this is such an important thing. And just to say, we're really, really looking forward to your kids coming back, because boy, are schools funny places without children. They just sort of, everything's hollow, it echoes. And we just need that energy and vitality back. So exciting times. Thank you.